This video contains spoilers for Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror. I wasn't particularly excited going into this story because historically I haven't been a big fan of these kind of Doctor Who stories, and while I did enjoy this story on the whole, it's very nearly exactly what I expected from another historical set episode of this show. We start the episode off with Nikola Tesla, where we see him giving this big speech to investors, and through this speech we start to get a better understanding of his character. We actually spend a few minutes with him before the Doctor even shows up, and I quite like that. It's not something that these episodes always do, but I think it was effective in giving us more insight into his character and making the story flow a little bit more easily. I do thoroughly enjoy this character, and I love how much time we get to spend with him in this episode. Of the famous historical figures that Doctor Who has tackled, Nikola Tesla has to be one of my favorites. He does feel like a real person, and the actor who portrayed him did a really good job in that part. It is a little bit of a shame that our companions are largely pushed to the side in this story, Ryan in particular, but it was made up for to a degree by how well Nikola Tesla was characterized. As I said, Ryan really doesn't get much to do. He just has a small conversation with Dorothy, which is about all. Graham also doesn't have much going for him other than Bradley Walsh being infectiously charming and shining in a couple of places, as well as a very brief moment with Edison. I actually think that Yaz got the most to do this time around. Through rewatching this episode, I realized that she actually gets some quality time within this story, particularly scenes with Tesla, even though he tends to get the bigger focus in those scenes. There wasn't a lot for her to do either, but I think there was more for her than the other two. I do like Yaz, and hopefully she gets more to do in the coming episodes and gets some good scenes later in the season and has a bigger part to play. I think that the best thing Yaz has going for her is the actor Mandip Gill. Even when her character doesn't have a lot to do within a given story, I do feel that Mandip brings her A game. It's not so much that she gives a mind-blowing performance as it is that what Mandip Gill is bringing to the character helps to elevate the character and feel like she is a more important character within the actual episode than perhaps the script would suggest. It's really just down to her performance, and I think she does a really good job with it. Edison worked for me within this story, but I couldn't help but feel that he was a little bit cartoonish, not to the degree of King James from last year, but he still didn't entirely feel like a real person. Also, his accent very much sounded like a British actor doing an American accent, so I looked it up, and as it turns out, he is in fact a British actor, as you could tell within the episode. This isn't a big deal, but it was a little bit distracting to hear this slightly exaggerated American accent. And this episode is paced quite well too. We do get to see a variety of locations as our characters traverse the story, and that was quite nice, especially since this episode is shot beautifully. I really do adore the look of this show, and I love how well it fits into this time period. The music is pretty great as well. It's composed to fit more into this time period, and I really love what Sagana Akinola has been doing for the music. And contrasting those elements, we do get to spend a little bit of time within the TARDIS, which is also shot gorgeously. I liked it in Series 11, but I think there's been a massive improvement with how the TARDIS is being lit because it's just beautiful. And I do really like how certain elements of this story tie together. For instance, the way inventors like Nikola Tesla and Thomas Edison react to the TARDIS. I'm glad that we had those scenes because to have inventors like that be able to see things like this was quite interesting. And also, the dynamic between these two characters mostly works well. I'm not sure how I feel about this adventure seemingly bringing them closer together. It didn't bother me really. I just don't think the story fully sold what it was doing with Edison and Tesla, but with that said, I largely enjoy the dynamic that they have. I also like how the villain of this episode ties into the story, representing somebody who has no original ideas and just steals useful things from other people. It's not quite the way that Thomas Edison is represented in the story. It's almost as though they are there to show that Edison could be worse because, as he said, Edison does make ideas happen, but the Skithra just steal things from other people and use them for themselves. So I do like how they tied into the story a little bit. It did help to make them feel a little bit less like any random villain that we get in most historical stories, although I do think that they are largely unmemorable villains, and of course the main villain, not just the scorpion creatures running around, is the Queen, and it does really look like her species is very closely related to the Rachnos Queen from 2006, but it isn't really addressed within the story whether or not this is a deliberate choice to have her character design also be ripping off another species as well as the technology. I don't know, I kind of suspect it isn't, but it is an interesting thing to think about. And while this character doesn't bring an awful lot to the story, it's what she brings out of the Doctor that sells this ending for me. I love the final scene that these two characters have in which the Doctor really commands the space and takes charge. They have a pretty good dynamic together, and I love the way Jodie Whittaker performs this scene. Her reaction to the Queen asking if she had ever seen a dead planet was great. It was one of my favorite parts of this story, and I do like how the Doctor is able to trick her and say that at the end, it was a nice little moment. And the Doctor throughout the story is great, and it's still evident that she's affected by the events of Spyfall, but we also do get some lovely moments from her Doctor. I think it's a real good balance of fun, lighthearted, with a little bit more edge to her that we see come out in places. Not to mention she has some great scenes with Tesla, one in particular when they're talking about inventing, which I just thoroughly enjoyed, and on the whole, I just think that Jodie Whittaker is still doing a great job in this part. Overall, I did enjoy this story a good amount. It is a quite well-executed historical story with really good characterization of Nikola Tesla, an enjoyable backdrop, a well-paced story, and a fitting, if partially forgettable villain. Though our companions don't have much going for them in here, they do still contribute to the story, but of the four main cast, Jodie Whittaker really stole the show this time around. This was a fun episode, which I did ultimately enjoy slightly more than I expected, and I'm going to give Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror a rating of 7.5 out of 10. If you'd like to check out a video I did with Time of the Whovians United over on their channel where we discuss this story, I'll have a link up for that. We had a lot of fun talking about it, so I'd recommend you check that out if it sounds interesting to you. And that's going to do it for now, folks. I hope to see you around soon for my review of Fugitive of the Jadoon, as well as a classic review of the Highlanders quite soon, and some more Doctor Who videos, as well as my 100 subscriber special, whenever I can find the time to record that. But if not, just know that I appreciate your time here today, and with that said, thank you very much for watching. Take care, and have a lovely week.